What's going on, people? It's the Xbot 448, and I'm reading something on the internet that is very interesting. It seems that with the leak of, the last leak of the SDKs for the X1 that showed Microsoft giving up to 70% of the 7th core to developers, as long as they don't implement like game-specific voice commands and such. It seems that there was more information in that SDK leak. Like I said, take this with a grain of salt, as it is a leak. You don't know how much of it is true, how much of it might be made up. But it seems that somebody was looking into the SDK documents and such, and found out that there is what they call a dual lane to the GPU, or two pipelines to the GPU with two graphics command processors. We always knew, for anybody who's looked into the hardware, that there was two graphics command processors. The funny thing was, we didn't really know what the second one was for. Alright, now you put this together with Microsoft kind of grouping up with AMD to make their chips, to make their GPU and stuff like that. And if you start looking into AMD and what they're trying to do with the graphic processing units, they're trying to do something completely different. When it comes to like XDMA and stuff, working with multiple GPUs, they even come out and say, basically, when you start looking at the GPUs that they're coming out with, don't be constrained by like the figures and numbers that you've seen from older GPUs, because they're basically creating a new way to render graphics with these things. With that being said, a lot of people are interested into what this dual lane, these two pipelines are doing, and what these two graphic command processors are doing. Now there's two theories. All right, one theory would be that one of the GCPs, or graphic command processors, is a system reserve for stuff like the snap feature and stuff like that, since technically without optimization the CPU is underpowered for a console, that they could use this command processor to render the graphics of the snap and do it in a very quick manner, eliminating a whole bunch of lag while the snap feature is being implemented. Now that is a possible theory. The other theory would be that the second graphics command processor, while the GPU is rendering one scene, this processor is actually filling whatever holes it can with the next scene, basically utilizing and saturating the GPU. And now what that would do is, if you're running a GPU at like 100% all the time, it's gonna fry, it's gonna burn. They have tests that do this, and with the tests that they do, they don't use gaming code to test this out. They use something called stress code, which is basically a highly detailed scenario just looped constantly until the GPU fries, or the graphics card, in the computer's case, fries. But that's not the case with game code. Game code has its ups and its downs. It's not doing something so specific and so detailed 100% of the time. So with that being said, the second graphics command processor could be filling in any holes for basically the next scene that needed to be rendered, completely utilizing the GPU and what it has to do. Now, I'm not saying that the GPU is going to run 100% like all the time, but you do have to look at one of the major benefits of the X1, and that would be its cooling system and ventilation. Not only that, its power brick is outside of the system, making it even that much cooler. But I've been playing the X1 since launch, and I have never heard the cooling system actually kick on. Alright, it's super quiet. It's a really good system. Not only that, I mean, look at the ventilation on the box. I mean, there are vents absolutely everywhere. You don't even know if the cooling system's on unless you look in through the vents and see that huge fan. Now, I'm not saying that the GPU is going to run 100% all the time, but it looks like they are going to thoroughly utilize what the GPU can do through AMD's newest GPU technology. And that could mean a huge benefit to the X1 itself. Now, not only that, if you look at you know, that whole 7th core that I've talked about in the previous video, you know, being able to utilize up to 70% of the 7th core for game developers, I think that is a preview to developers, because once DirectX 12 and its efficiency is implemented into the system, once you get the Windows 10 integration and that streamlined initiative with that OS put into the system, I think it's going to free up, you know, space and power on the CPU and on the system as a whole. And I think what's going to happen is that 7th core is going to be able to be fully utilized for developers, for games. And I believe that the OS and the Connect commands are both going to be run on that 8th and final core. Now, I don't have any verification on this. I just see where things are going, and this is kind of my hypothesis with that. So, you know, if it turns out to be true, just remember you heard it here first, that I believe that being able to use the 7th core up to 70% is just the beginning. And once DX12 and Windows 10 are optimized into the system, I believe that the 7 cores are going to be for gaming, period. Alright, and that final core is going to have both the OS and the Connect commands on it, and it's going to work no problem. Not only that, there is one other mystery with this SDK leak, and this is a big one. I know Microsoft they've come out and said about the GPU that's not a stacked GPU. I know there's been a couple other terms thrown out there that are kind of they're very unverified terms, all right? I believe the most common one is a split GPU. All right. Now, here's something funny when it comes to the SDK leak. It actually showed specs for a DMA block being quote-unquote busy, you know, within the GPU area of the hardware. Now, for people who don't know, a DMA block comes from an AMD technology called XDMA. And that technology deals with information being passed to multiple GPUs being used, you know, to render a game or application. Now, if the X1 doesn't have multiple GPUs, why does it have a DMA block, and why is it busy? You know, some people have thrown out the theory that it's the move engines, and it's the way that the GPU and the move engines communicate with each other, which, you know, it could be true. But this is very interesting technology and ways of building hardware that I don't think we've seen yet, showing that the X1 is definitely a future-proof system, and that there are things to the X1 that we just don't understand yet. At least not until around the end of the year, when the NDAs get lifted and people are, you know, ready to talk about the hardware. But as usual, if you like this video, definitely hit that thumbs up button for me. Subscribe and always comment. But as for now, this is the Xbot 448, and I am definitely signing off.
I'm so wide and nerdy, just too wide and nerdy. Think I'm just too wide and nerdy.